Hi everyone, welcome to this quick tutorial on Power BI, and let's learn a little bit about Power BI, where it helps us and how we can use it. So basically it's a self-service BI tool, and in this tutorial we learn about what is Power BI, benefits of Power BI, connecting data to it, visualizing the data here, also briefly understand on data models which help us in connecting different data sets or establishing relationships between them. Also, understanding DAX expressions that is used when you would want to work on your data at an extensive level. And then we will have a quick demo on usage of Power BI. Now, what is Power BI? It is a business intelligence tool to visualize your data and share insights across your organization. So when we talk about BI, it came into existence as a self-service BI tool, and it does have different components which can be used. Now, before we get into details of Power BI, let's understand what are the different components or what are the different ways in which you can work on your Power BI. Now, one of the main challenges when it comes to organizations or users is that data is scattered in different places. It might be in different formats, and everyone would want to use that data to basically perform some calculations, create visualizations or dashboards which could be interactive. And that's where they would want to bring all the data in one place, might be transform it so that you can filter out and not load huge amount of data in your system, and you can work on selective data. So when it comes to Power BI, it helps us in ETL, it helps us in data modeling, it helps in data storage and reporting. So what are the benefits of Power BI? Here are some of the benefits. So extract intelligence rapidly and accurately. So that's basically transforming your enterprise data into rich visuals and accurate reports for enhanced decision making. Now, one thing we already know that when we talk about data in raw format might have a lot of hidden information. If we look at different data sets, which I'll show you in the process, it might have a lot of meaning, but then the real meaning comes out of the data if we can create visualizations, if we can create relationships between different data sets, and thus that can help us in enhanced decision making. Now, Power BI supports advanced data services. It integrates seamlessly with advanced cloud services like Cortana to provide results for the verbal data queries as well. When you talk about seamlessly integrating with existing applications, that's one more benefit of Power BI. So it adopts analytics and reporting capabilities easily to embed interactive visuals quickly in your applications. You can build rich personalized dashboards. So it basically provides a unified user experience with customized dashboard and reports that meet your exact needs. It also has a way where you can have secure way of publishing your reports. So you can set up automatic data refresh and rapidly publish reports, allowing multiple users to avail the latest information across your organization or across your working community. So Power BI can connect to different sources. We'll see that in a while. So basically you have an option which says get data, and that basically opens up a window where you can find different type of data sources such as Excel, your CSV or text, JSON, PDF, getting data from databases, or directly accessing data from databases. Now, before we get further into understanding how Power BI looks like, it would be a good idea to share information in how you can set that up on your machine. So when it comes to your Power BI, and let me open up a notepad here. So for example, I bring up a notepad. Let's say when you talk about your Power BI components, so you basically have Power BI desktop, and that's mainly your playground, or that's mainly used for any kind of development activities. You have your Power BI server, or you can say service. Now this one is where you would make reports online and share or make them available to different BUs. Now that's one more component of Power BI. And then you also have your Power BI mobile, which is mainly for viewing the information, or I would say viewing reports. So these are the three main components. We can also look at the licensing information of these. So these are the main. So Power BI desktop is something which you can set up on your laptop or on your machine. Power BI server is where you can log in with your user ID and password, and Power BI mobile is mainly to view your reports. Now, how do you set this up before you can explore or start working on Power BI? So here is a link which you can basically use. So if you look into this, so this one basically says service, self-service, sign up for Power BI. It says sign up of Power BI service as an individual. Normally when you would want to use Power BI, you can use a website called HTTP, and then you have basically app, and let's say I think it's called apppowerbi.com. Now this is the place where you can basically log in. Now if you see here, I have created an account, and if you look at my account, it says auatl.onmicrosoft.com. Now how do you get this kind of email? Because when you talk about Power BI, it will expect you to have a official ID, and it does not take IDs which are from common domains such as Google or Yahoo and so on. So this particular link gives you an idea how you can do that. So basically you have what is Power BI, basic explanation on that. It says signing up for Power BI service. So Power BI desktop, it's a totally free download. And then you have mobile apps, also a totally free download. And here it says that what kind of email addresses it supports. And if we look into this, you have to either sign up, because that does not accept your private email IDs, or you can go for this one which says enroll US government organization, and this is where you can basically sign up for Power BI. So it basically says try free. If you go to the website, say powerbi.microsoft.com, or you could go into this one which I was saying, http://app.yourpowerbi.com, and this is what you can use. Or as mentioned, you can go to powerbi.microsoft.com. For example, if I open this in a different tab, it takes me to Power BI Microsoft. I can say start free. I can click on this. It says try free, but then when it asks you to sign in, this is where some of us face problem, because it does not take your private email ID. Now how do you tackle that? What you can do here is on this page which says learn about alternate ways to sign up, you can basically open up this link, and in this link it says sign up for Power BI with a new Microsoft 365 trial account. And what you can do is you can basically click on this link which takes you to the Office 365, and what you can do here is you can search for something which says say 365 E3, and here you have try it for free. So in my case it is translating. Okay, so here you have an option which says try it for free. Click on this one and then basically go ahead with your sign up process. Now once you do that, you can basically create an account or give a email ID. So it asks you to give an email ID to check if you already have an account. And once you do that, it will guide you through the process where you can create an account like I have done. Now, once you have done that, so for example, we can go into this page, which I said http://app powerbi.com. Now, once you have created an account, you would be asked to log in. Now I can click and log in here and then basically give in my password. And once I do that, it takes me to the Power BI server or service. Now, on the top right, it might say that go for a trial version. I have already selected that, and this is a pro trial which is giving me validity for 60 days. So this is the service which I can use. Now what it means is I can be using my Power BI desktop, which would be also installed. So once you log into this page, you can basically click on apps. You can basically search for something like Power BI, and that will show up an app and you can install and download on your machine. Now, once that is there, you can basically bring it up. So for example, in my case, I can just say Power BI desktop, and that's the app which I have installed on my machine, and basically that comes up. So that's your Power BI desktop which is coming up, and it will still ask you to sign in so that you can share your information through Power BI. So you see here on the top, I'm already signed in, and here it also shows you some tutorials and videos which basically helps you in getting to know something more or what's new. So you can always browse that. So you would have your Power BI desktop which would be set up. You would also have your Power BI service which would be running, and then basically whatever you have developed on your Power BI desktop, you can share that through the Power BI service. Now, usually when you talk about licensing, I can give you brief insights here. So you basically have your Power BI service, as I said, licensing. So you have the pro version, which is basically your $9.9 per user per month, and basically it has some kind of limitation. So it has, say, max 10 gigabyte. You can work on some features like incremental refresh is not allowed. You can always look onto the Microsoft website for more details, and in those kind of cases you usually go for the premium account if you are a extensive user. And premium account basically is conditional based, so it depends on your requirements, and then basically you pay for the service what you use. So that's mainly about your servicing. Now when you talk about your server and service, as I said, it is basically making your reports online and sharing and making them available to different BUs. So that is the highlight. So when you talk about sharing reports, that's one of the things. You have anomaly detection, that's also possible here. You can talk about automation of reports. You have security, that is, you can go for role based or role level based kind of security implementation. All those are some of the features of your Power BI server and service. So it is good to know and basically have your desktop and Power BI service set up. Now once you have that, then you basically have your Power BI. Now when you talk about your Power BI, it basically helps you with various things. So this is how easily you can have it set up, and then basically you can explore this. So for example, as I was saying, Power BI can connect to different data sources. Now I do have an option here which says get data. I can click on this and that shows me all the different data sources. I can even click on more if I am interested in looking what more Power BI desktop tool helps me to do. So it shows me all the different ways in which you can get the data. You see here the servers, so the database services, your folders, your different formats. You can click on file formats or databases. You can look at Power Platform. So if basically you are connecting to a platform and getting some services, you can connect to the cloud, that is Azure. You have online services, and then you have other options. So these are all the ways in which you can get your data. When you talk about visualizations, you see a lot of visualization options here which can be used once your data is loaded. And I will explore and explain more about this. So you have something called as insert, wherein you can go in for different visuals or different types. You can also get into, say, transform the data. Now that basically is going to pop up and bring a Power Query editor. Now that's where a lot of your ETL works happen. So when you do a transform data, it opens up Power Query editor, which we can use to transform the data or change the data or modify the data as per our requirement before loading all of it into our Power BI. So you also have option here which says modeling, wherein we can create new tables, or we can work on our data where we can manage relationships. So as of now, we don't have any data, so it does not show this one as activated, but that can be activated. This is where you can view your reports. So this is, in short, exploring your Power BI. We'll see what are the different options which we can use here. So it basically supports different kind of data. So when we look at the visualization pane, that basically allows us to create different kind of visualizations here, and we will understand that. So you can basically visualize on your different data and create different kind of charts, graphs, maps, and basically derive insights from your data. Now, when you talk about data models, that's where you can basically establish relationships. So when you talk about data models, it is basically used to connect multiple data sources to build a relationship. Now, we might have different data sets, or we might have data coming in from different tables, where we may want to basically get insights or get data from multiple data sources for our purpose. Now, in that case, data models do help us. So for example, if you have two tables, let's look at the standard tables. So you have products lookup table, and you also have the sales table. Now, usually what you have in any kind of scenario is, if we basically say you have your data tables, so that's basically where your data resides, and then you have series of your lookup tables. So usually you might have, say, your data tables here, and this is what I'm talking about, which might have some data. For example, let's say sales is one of them. You might have some other data table which might be, for example, let's say budget table, or might be something else. And these are your data tables. Now at the other end, you might have your lookup tables. So basically you have various lookup tables, and these lookup tables, for example, let's say this one is customer, this one is territory, let's say this is product, and let's say this one is a calendar. So these are basically my lookup tables. So we can basically, as I said, your data might be coming in from different sources, let's say database, or let's say some kind of files, or let's say some kind of systems what you have. So your data might be coming in from different places. Now you might want to transform the data. So this is where I could say there is your query editor, which I was explaining. So you have your query editor, which basically allows you to edit the data table, or basically allows you to edit the data before it is loaded, right? You can hide a column, you can add a new column, you can modify your column. So your query editors would be basically used to work on the data which goes into your data tables. Now you might have a lot of lookup tables, as I said. So let's say these are my lookup tables, and these are my data tables. So what we need is, sometimes we need information based on our lookup tables and data tables. Now that's where data modeling comes into picture. So basically, if I would want to extract information from here, so I can notice that there is a product key here, and there is a product key here. Now this is where we are already talking about, say, foreign keys, or we are talking about your relationships. Right now, when you talk about relational databases, you have something called as foreign key constraints, which is in Power BI terms, I would say it's not exactly a constraint, but it is more of a filter propagation instead, which is used to basically connect your different data sources. And you could have basically cross filter directions. You can go for single or one to one or one to many or many to many kind of relationships, which basically allows you to work on the data. So we will learn more about data models when we are doing a quick demo there, where we can talk a little bit about normalization and denormalization, the way the data exists, right? And then you basically would want to gather insights from your data. So when you talk about your two data sources, as I said, so you have a products lookup table, you have a sales table. Now if you would want to calculate the total order quantity of each product name, which is, we are talking about the order quantity as a information here, and you have product name here. Now how do you get that information? What we see here is we would want something like this, or we would want more information. So how do we do that? So what we can do is the order quantity for each product is basically showing us the same value. Now this is because the product and sales tables are not connected and there is no relationship between them. Even if you would want to take two sources and just get information out of them, Power BI would complain that there is no relationship established between them. So what we do is we create a data model. So what we do is we build a relationship between both the tables using a common key column, which exists in both cases. As I said, there is a product key here, there is a product key here. So that basically allows us to have a relationship between these two. Now that could be one to one. This could also be related to other tables. So it could be one to many. You could have many to one. So all those relationships are possible. So product key is basically used to create a relationship. You see the arrow mark, and then there is also this star, which can basically mean one to many. Now when the product key is used to join these two tables or form a relationship, then we can look at the product names and the order quantities, which basically gives me a total. Now that's the basic use of your data models. Now what about this DAX? So basically data analysis expressions. Now that's a library of functions and operators that can be combined to build formulas and expressions in Power BI desktop. Usually when we work on our data sources, when we would want to connect them, it automatically shows us these data analysis expressions. However, this gives us extension. It basically gives us more power to work on our data. Now, sometimes instead of working on DAX or DAX expressions, it would be good to go for better data modeling and have the relationships established better. And sometimes when the relationships are established, you could use your DAX, which basically gives you more power on working on your data. So your values are calculated based on information from each row of a table. It appends values to each row in a table and stores them in the model. It increases the file size. So that's what happens. Now you can right click on any column to add a new column. And for example, in this one, it shows that there was a quantity type calculated column, which was based on the calculation what we see here on the top in the expression bar, which says what kind of calculation was performed. And that basically gives us the value for quantity type, and that is basically added here to our existing data. So that's the power of DAX and Power BI. So you also have something called as measures. So DAX allows you to create new calculated columns and measures. So basically here, if you see, we are working on AW underscore sales, and then we have selected quantities sold. And what we are looking at in the report is we can basically right click on any table name to add a new measure here. So we have added what we call as quantity sold as the measure. So values are calculated based on information from any filters in the report. We will see this, how this can be done. And that basically here, the measure does not increase the file size. It does not create new data in the table themselves in comparison to what we were seeing earlier, that is your calculated columns. So these are your type of DAX functions. So DAX allows you to create new calculated columns and measures. So you have date and time, which basically allows you to work on date and time data or fields. You have logical functions which allow us to create new filters or add more filters to our data. You have text functions which basically allows us to say transform the data into a lowercase or an uppercase, or basically get the length of a string, or concatenate two fields, or basically do a filtering based on some criteria, or replacing some content. You also have statistical functions which can be used. You have information functions which can be used. So these are different types of DAX functions which we can use in Power BI. So we will learn more on Power BI through a quick demo where we can use some data sets, and those data sets could be found on internet, although I can also upload that on a GitHub link and you will have access to those data sets. So let's learn about Power BI through a quick demo by uploading some data sets and playing with those data sets. Let's look at a sample data set and let's upload it. And as I explained, while uploading, let's also transform the data so that we can have selective fields or selected data loaded here instead of loading the complete data set. And then let's see how we can visualize this, or how we can use the information in this data set. Now what we can do here is we can click on get data, and then we can choose one of the data formats which we would be looking for. So for example, I can go for Excel and basically click on this. Now here are some of my data sets. So let's look into the folder here, and these data sets are also available on my GitHub link, which I'll share with you later. So here we have something called a superstore. Let's click on this, and here I already have a data set which is global superstore, or I also have selective data. So let's select this one, click on open. Now that's basically connecting to my data source, and that will show me what does that Excel sheet have. So it has different tabs, which is orders, people, and returns. So let's select orders, and that basically gives me a preview of the data which I have. And if you scroll all the way to right, it shows me city, state, and then country. And if you see here, we do see information of all the countries. Now this can be huge amount of data which we would want to look into. But say for example, my use case is that I'm interested in looking for the data for United States and as a country and all its states. So we will do that when we do a transform. Now we can also select the returns tab, and that shows me these three fields. However, the first row should have been the heading of this particular data set, and we will transform that. Now I can go ahead and click on load, but that will load all the data. So instead of that, let's go for transforming. So let's click on transform data. Now once you do that, it brings you your toolkit, that brings you your Power Query Editor, which allows you to transform your data. So for example, we have data from returns tab or returns data source, as you see here. So we see column 1, column 2, and column 3, and that also shows the type of the data here. It also gives me a quick small option here. Let's select this, and then I can say use first row as header. Now there are various other options which you can do. You can add a custom column, you can add column with examples, you can keep the top rows, you can remove the top rows, you can keep errors, keep duplicates. So there are different ways, and you can also do a merge query or append query. So as of now, let's just say use first row as headers, and that basically shows that now my first row has become the header. You also see in the applied steps, it basically tells me if I have changed the type of the data. If I have made any other changes, those steps will get added here. So it basically shows me the name as it returns. It shows me applied steps where I've changed the type, and now I basically have this information. Now this is something where you can change the type, or you can basically set it to a particular format. However, we are not doing anything of that sort right now, so we can do that for any of these columns. So this looks good. When it comes to orders, let's click on this. And as I said, I would be interested in selecting for country as United States only. And let me just work on that data. However, we can work on all the data. So let me scroll all the way to right. And here I have the country. Now there are these filters which we can use. So basically I can click on this, and that shows me all the countries are selected. Now there is also something called as text filters, which we will see how we can use to select particular data. I basically have other ways of filtering the data. So for example, now I will just uncheck this select all, and what I would be interested is in United States. So let's type it here. That shows me as an option here. Select this and then basically say OK. So that should basically now filter out, and it shows me the data is United States only, and then you have different states and rest of the data remains. So if you look at the applied steps, it tells me that there are filtered rows. Now we have done the basic transformation for this data set on these two data sources, that is orders and returns. So here you have an option which says close and apply. So close the query editor window and apply any pending changes. You can click on this and it says apply. So for example, I can just say apply for now, and that should basically apply the changes which I have performed using my query editor. That is, I have transformed the data so that I can have selective data uploaded in my Power BI. Now it's doing that. It shows me it is working on both of these data sources, that is orders and returns. So that's done. And now basically, if there are any other pending changes, we can just do a close and apply. So that basically has closed, and now you would see the data appearing here. So I have uploaded the data as per my preferences. Now if you click on the data tab here, so it basically shows you your data fields. It might take some time to populate, but if you see in the country field now, even if I click on the filter, it just shows me United States. Now that's what we wanted. So we have already uploaded this data in orders. You can always expand the option here, which shows me all the fields which are there in this. Might be this is an aggregation, might be that's an order date. So this is again some kind of aggregation. We can change the data types. So we are looking at all the fields in my orders table, or basically coming from the orders data source. I also have returns, which shows me 3 fields, and that shows me the data which is returned, order ID and region. So the column names are applied correctly as we want, and that basically looks fine. Now we can also look at your model. So when you click on model, it shows me these two. However, there is no, as of now, relationship established between them. So it says under properties, select one or more model objects to set their properties. So right now, these are not related. There is no relationship established between them. So if I would want some data which relates to orders and returns, then that would fail because it would say there is no relationship. Now I can go to the first option which says report. and we have not created any report here. Although we can create a simple report, we can look at the data. So we have our orders field. Now we can basically pull out some information from here. We can choose what kind of report we may want to create. So for example, let's go for the table option from visualizations. You have various options here which we can use. This is where you can do a formatting. This is where you can select the fields. This is where you can search and filter out the data. You can also add data fields here. So first let's click on table, and that basically gives me a table. Now this table as of now does not have anything. So you can use the filter and slices option here, which will affect the visualization. Or basically what you can do is, now since we have orders here, so this is my orders and I would like to work on this. So let's say, for example, country is, I can select country as a field, and if you say, it shows me country is all as of now, and it says the value is United States. What I can also do is, I'm interested in the states, so I have state. Now I can basically drag and drop it here, and then the state gets added here. So I can basically say select all, and that should basically take care of my state field being added here. So state is all, country is all. Now we can basically look at something else. So might be, let's choose sales, and I can just drag and drop sales here. So that basically says, if you would want to have any kind of advanced filtering, which says filter type, so go for advanced filtering is less than or equal, or you can also go for advanced filters. So that's fine as of now. So we have added some fields here, and that's basically my data here. So let's go for filters here, which basically should select all my fields. Now if you see, the visualization shows my country, sales, and state, which we had either by selecting the fields and dropping them here, or you can in this section where it says fields. So you can, for example, let me show it again. So I can just delete this. I can click on the table option. I can just drag it here. I can basically make it bigger, and I need to add data to this one. So it says add data fields here. So now let's say country is what we are interested in. We are also interested in states. So let's drop that here, and let's say sales. So this is also what I'm interested. So I'm looking at one specific country. I'm looking at sales per state. And when we look at sales, it basically tells me that this is a summation. So you will basically get the total sales which have happened. Now we are looking at this data here. We can always go to formatting. We can click on grid. We can basically increase the font here. We can change the grid color. So for example, let's make it, for example, blue. So I can just select this, and it should basically allow me to have the grid color as blue. Now I can go in for the grid thickness. I can go for row padding, outline color. So we can basically make it a little bit more readable. And then we can basically increase the font size here to look at the information. And you have other options here. So what would you want to do with column headers? So I can basically have the font color, background color is fine. Do you want to have an outline? Do you want to have a change in font? What is the text size? Might be we can make the heading a little bigger. And then basically you also have the field formatting. So all those could be done. You could go for background, and all these things can be done in formatting. So now we already have our data here, and this basically looks good. And this is basically one of my visuals which I have here. And this has given me some information for sales, and basically I can scroll this. I can also make it bigger. So I could select a particular field if I'm more interested in looking at the information for a particular state. Now I can add more fields to this. So this is my one of the reports which I have created. Now what I can do with this report is I can basically have more data fields. I can add filters to this. I can basically look into all the data here by just clicking somewhere in the grid, but somewhere outside, if you select a particular row, then that data shows up. Here you have an option of focus mode, which you can go for. You can look at the other options which says export data. Now, if this is the data which you are interested in, you can export it. You can always do show as a table if you are interested in. You can do a sort by country, sales, or state. So for example, let's do a sorting by state. And that basically gives me the data which has been sorted by state information. Now we could obviously have the information here, so I can then change the order so it shows me alphabetically. This is the information which I have. So I've created a simple visualization using the data which I have. And what I can do is I can click on save. So that basically asks me to save this as a Power BI file which has an extension of PBIX, and I can basically call it my report. So let's say first report, and here I can say country, or I can say state wise sales in USA. Let's say USA, and that basically is my first report. Now once you have saved this report, you can always look on your machine. For example, if I go in here and if I go into this folder, might be I should look on desktop, and this is where I should have saved it. So it shows me first report state-wise. That will open up in Power BI. And we have created a simple report which we have basically used by taking our data. Now I can also do is I can publish this if I would want to share this information. So publish this report online in Power BI service. You can basically select your report, what we have here, and I clicked on publish. So it says what's the destination. So you can have different workspaces. I will choose the default, that's my workspace. I can click on select. Now it says publishing first report statewide sales in USA to Power BI. You can create a portrait view of your report and you can do all that stuff. So let it publish, and then we can basically look into our Power BI server. That's our service where the information is already shared or published, I would say, which can then be shared with different sources. So we can come here and basically I can look into the Power BI, and this is where I will be able to look into my workspaces. And let's look in my workspace. So it says this is the place where I had initially downloaded Power BI dataset. It says your dataset is ready. Let Power BI help you explore your data, right? So you can always do this. You can click on view dataset, which basically allows you to bring out your workspace and first report state wise sales. Now that's the report which we have published. So let's first check in our desktop if that's done. So it says success, open first report in Power BI. Now I can click on this one straight away, and that takes me to my service. Now once it takes me to the service, it shows me the report which we created, which we published, and it basically has the option where I can save it as a different copy or give a different name. I can embed this in a website or a portal. I can publish to web, embed this report for public access by anyone on the internet. We can do that. We can export it to PowerPoint. So we can do all these options. You also have an option of view where you can change the view. You can basically also edit report here. So you can do that. If you are interested in something specific, you can do a sharing to teams. So if you have your teams or groups set up, you can share it with them. You have an option of common panes. You can basically view usage metrics report. Now that can be sometimes helpful. You can basically go ahead and go and subscribe a particular report. So if there are new changes made, you will be the one who will be informed. You can click on share. Now if I click on share here from my service, it says only users with Power BI Pro will have access to this report. Recipients will have the same access as you unless row level security on the data set further restricts them. So I can grant access, and this is where I will have to give the email IDs of the people with a message that I would want to have them look at this report, right? You can also allow recipients to build new content using the underlying data sets, and you can send an email notification to the users. As of now, I don't have any other groups, so I'll not be sharing it, but I have created a simple report. Now let's also look at edit report. Let's just to see what it helps us. And when you click on edit report, it basically brings up this one which says your file, view. It gives you the filters. It basically allows you to add data fields to this. So it is basically giving access to these data sets which were in my desktop. It is basically allowing you to give or create different visualizations. Now here we have the data which we are looking at, and if say for example somebody is interested in filtering the data, so you could do that. So you could click on filter here, and that basically applies. This is the filter we have. Now country is fine. Sales might be, I can click on sales and I would say okay, let's look at sales which is more than a particular amount. So we can say is greater than, and might be I can give a number here. So I can say 30,000, and basically I can say apply filter. So right now I'm applying filter, and I would look at the values, which also shows me the total value is changed. So you have not only created a report, you have published it, and now from the service you can edit it. So I'm looking at particular data here, and then basically I can click on file and I can save it, or I can say save a copy of the report, and let's say I will call it the same name. So I'll say first report underscore state wise sales, and I will say modified. So let's do a save, and the report has been saved. So now you're looking at the data here. So that is basically giving you information. So when I click on my workspace here, I can click on reports, and that does show me my previous report. It shows me the modified report. It gives me an option of looking at the usage metrics report. So say for example you want to click on this one, and it will basically give you the usage metrics. So let's click on this one, and that basically shows me the report usage metrics which is generated. So views per day, unique viewers per day. You would want to look at the different platforms, who was using it, views by user, and this can be sometimes useful if we would want to look into this one. Now I can go back to my workspace, I can click on reports, and that basically took me to usage metrics. I could be sharing it, I can analyze in Excel, I can look for quick insights based on this data what we have. You can basically look at the related information. You can also look at the settings of this one. And basically this is how you have your data report here. Now that also shows me the data sets option. So which basically gives me the data sets which can be used to create further reports. And we have our data here. So for example, if I click on create report, it basically gives me these data sets, and we can continue working on this. So this is how I have a simple report created without basically working on two different data sources, but I have selected some data here, and then I can basically add details to this. So for example, now if we look at orders and say, for example, this is the data I have, and say you would want to add some fields. So let's go to returns and say, for example, I would be interested in looking at the products. So might be what I should do is I should replace the report here. Instead of country, it would be interesting to look at the product which we have, or basically customer ID. So we can look at customer ID, we can look at the order ID, which would be interesting to see if there is a particular order, what was the sales which was generated, and if there were any returns which were happening on that. So for example, here when I have these, let me cut out country as a field, and I will basically take order ID and place it here. So now if you see, my data has been easily modified. So I have my order ID, I have sales, and I have state-wise information. So you have basically all the information, but this is now order ID, state, and so on. Now, what if I would want to also see based on the order ID, if I say I would want the returned field. So for example, I would want to take this one and let's drag and drop it here. Now that says cannot display the visual. Now why is that? So if you click on see details, that says cannot determine relationships between the fields. So it cannot display the data because Power BI cannot determine the relationship between two or more fields. And how do we fix that? So for example, if I click on fix this, now it says there is a missing relationship between these fields. Use auto detect to search for relationships or create them manually. Now I can click on auto detect, which will try to search for fields which exist in both the data sets, or basically I can create relationships. So let's click on create relationships, and that basically takes me to this page which says there are no relationships defined from table to table and so on. So I can click on new. Now here it says select the tables and the columns that are related. Now I can say orders. Now those are my fields where you have order IDs, and it automatically shows that returns also has an order ID field, although all the values might not be same, but this is how you can create a relationship. And it says the cardinality says many to one, so you can have basically many to one relationship. You're saying cross filter direction is single, so make this relationship active, and it has already helped us basically identifying the field. So I can say okay. So it says now these two tables should be related or should be connected based on order ID. So here we have this, and let's basically say close. Now once that is done, if you see, I have order ID, I have returned, I have sales column, and I have state. And if you see in returned, I do have a value of yes, which shows this particular order ID had generated some sales, and it was for state Alabama, and it was returned, and the value is yes. So if you scroll down, you basically see all the values. Now we can add different filters where we can say I would want only yes and no. Now this is again an interesting report. So let's go in also into the formatting, and what we can do is we can look at, say, the grid option. If we would want to basically say vertical grid, and let's say on, and it says vertical grid color. So let's select this. Might be I can try doing a black here. It puts it in the right nice table format, and that basically looks good. So you have sales, returned, and so on. And this is basically the order which I'm seeing here. So for example, if I would want to change the order, and if I'm saying okay, I would like to look at sales and returned and so on. So we can be doing that. We can come here and say, for example, I have sales and returned. Let's try moving the sales column over here. Might be state is an information which we would want in the beginning. So let me also move the states all the way here. So it gives me state, it gives me the order ID, sales, and if there was a return which was happening on that particular product. So easily I've modified my report. Now what I can do is I can just save it, and I can do the same thing. So I can publish it, I can basically continue using it, or I can work on a new report. So let's continue learning, and now here we will also see how you can load some data and perform some transformations and basically get multiple results or multiple tables or multiple data sets which can be then further used for reporting. So Power BI does give you a lot of options. Now here you have an option, as we saw earlier, that is get data, or what you can do is you have an option where you can create new data also, which says enter data. Now this is something which can be easily used if you have relatively less number of fields. So you can basically add more columns here, and you can basically add values. So for example, if I would just call it something like scientist ID, okay, and then I can say scientist name, and then basically I can say domain, and then I can say, for example, let's say year of joining, and I can keep adding the number of columns here. I can delete the columns, right? And I can give this, and I can say country. So that's it. And now we have created these five five columns, which we have given some names, and we can start entering some values. So I can basically say, let this scientist ID be 2234. I can give some name. So let's give Peter, let's say domain, and I can say biotechnology. I can give year of joining 2011, and I can say Germany as the country. And I really don't want this particular column, so I can go ahead and delete this. Now I can come here, and then I can give something else. So I can say this is scientist ID. I can give John. Let's say the scientist is mainly working in physics, and then I can say 2018, and let's say France, and go back here, and let's say 4567, and let's say Marie, and let's say she does her research in molecules, and let's call it 2001, and let's say Italy. Okay, and you can continue adding data in this way. Now you can say if the data is already here, so I can say, for example, no, I do not want this particular row. I do not want this particular row. So you can basically keep adding values here. Now you can say edit. So here we have to give some names. So let's say scientists. Okay, and then if you choose edit, it basically brings up your Power BI editor, which allows you to work on these fields if you would want to make some changes. Now we can make some changes here. We can see what are the number of rows. We can basically perform any kind of transactions here. So this one basically tells me what is the data type. So here we see scientist ID, and this clearly tells me this is an integer. However, we will not want to do any kind of computations here. So we can as well change this. So I can just do a right click, and I can work on this particular column. What I can also do is I can just click on this, and this tells me that you would want to change it to date time, or you want to change it to some number. So I can just say string, because we are not going to perform any computation here. So on the ID column, so let's say text, and I'm changing it. So it says replace current, add a new step. So selected column has an existing type conversion. Would you like to replace the existing conversion or preserve the existing? So I will say replace current. And now the data type has been changed. It is of a string. And if you see, this step has got added here. So it says that the change type is the kind of transformation we did here. So that's fine. Now what we can also do is, we have the scientist name, but we don't like the column name here. So it would be good to change this. So there is something called as remove or remove columns and so on. So when you do a right click, it gives you a lot of options in applying filters or doing some transformation. If I just click on this one, so what I can do is I can look at the date time, and let's go here. So we have an option which says, do you want to change the type? Now we could have done that here, or like I said, you could choose the time and do it. You can just say transform, and how do you want to change it? So do you want to change it to uppercase? Well, you can do that, and changes all the values of this one. What I can do is I can again do a right click, and I can choose, basically, if you would want to clean up the data, or if you would want to convert to lowercase, you want to capitalize each word. So let's choose that. And if you see here, the steps are getting added. Now to undo any particular step, if I just cancel this, then I'm back to this. If I cancel this, I'm back to my original form. So you can anytime undo your changes, and you can basically work on this. So we are working on this particular column. Now there are various other options that you can look at. So for example, this is some of my data, but it does not have much information. It would be good to load some bigger data set and then use these transformations, or basically working on changing the data types, as I mentioned. Or if you would want to do a filtering and remove certain fields and only select particular fields, if that's what you're interested, doing a right click where I want to create a copy of this, and then basically I can use that particular copy. Now what I can also do is, I can add column from examples, I can duplicate column, and then I can make some changes to that. So this is my duplicate column, and say for example, you would want this one to be changed. So we can say remove duplicates. We can basically, if you're doing some kind of change, you want to change the format here, you can do that. You can use for other things like filling up and all that. Now I can just call it rename, and let's say alias scientist name, right? And I can continue adding columns, or I can do some transformations. And once you have done with these transactions, now this one, if you see, it shows as integer, but is it an integer? No, this is an date format. So I can go for modeling and change the formats. What I can also do is, I can select this, and it says it's not a decimal, it's not a fixed decimal, it is date time, it is date, it is date time and time zone, right? And you can select any one of these. So for example, let's make it date, which makes it more meaningful. But then what happens is, when you do this, it is going for the default dates or the older dates. So I don't like that. So what we will have to do is, we will have to basically transform this. And here we have transform, you have change type. So you have date and time, you have date, you have time. So let's choose date and time. And if you see here, it gives me some default timing based on these values, which we do not like. So again, filter it out. But what we can do is, we can just make sure that this is changed, or you want to make it a string, because we are not going to do any computation here. So I can keep it as date, but then if I have more fields like month and days and so on, then you can do that. So here it also has the option. So when you have selected this, you have an option called transform, and transform also has various options which allow you to work on these. Do you want to do some scientific calculations? Do you want to work on the date field? So as of now it is just integer, so we can use one of these. We can do a group by, but obviously we don't have much data here. So as of now, let us retain this. I can just change this to text, and that's okay, because we are going to look at this later. We can add more data and work on it. So as of now, once we have done all these changes, you can go back to, say, home, and here you have close and apply, and I can basically say close and apply. So the changes will be applied, and then my new table, which we just created by entering some random data, performing some basic transformations, will be available. So if you look into this one, so that's where my data is. It shows me the columns, but there is no aggregated column as such here. You don't see any summation mark. You just see the field names or the column names. You see the values. Now obviously if you go into modeling, there is no existence of a different table which you can join these tables, or you can perform some transactions, come back to the data set. So this looks good, and we have it here. Now obviously we have not created any visualization based on this, which we can, and we can continue working on it. So here, this is my data set, which is a small table where we have created some data, and we can use it anytime. Now, let's work on a bigger data set and see what kind of transformations we can do. We can then also see on modeling, or basically using some smarter ways of working with the data. So what we would want to do is we would want to load some data here. So let's go into home, let's go to get data, let's use our old store data, and I'm going to take the global superstore, which is huge data set with all the countries and the products and the sales which have happened. And we can take this data, but before loading it, as I suggested earlier, we should basically transform the data. So that you don't end up loading everything and you don't work on all the data. I mean, unless you really want to. So here this Excel sheet which I'm talking about has two different tabs. We have used it before. So let's use orders, let's use returns, and that basically shows me the data what we have. So I can do a load, but that's not what we would want to do. So you can do a load and you can get all the data, but let's go to transform, make some basic transformations before we load the data. So our Power BI editor allows us to work on this. Now here we have, it says this preview may be up to 9 days old. So I can do a refresh. I can select this and I say, first thing is use first row as header, because that's what I want. So it is basically setting the first row as header, which looks good. And we have some order IDs. We have the returned, if the product was returned. So let's look at the filter here. So it just has yes values, which we are looking at. So it says list may be incomplete. Let's say load more. And let's see what are the filters here. So either there might be a product which is returned, or it might be blank field, so that is chosen, so that's fine. We have order ID, we have region, which is basically showing me different regions here. Let's look at orders, and orders is again having your row ID, order date, ship mode. So you have quite large amount of data here for your different countries. Now in earlier example I chose United States, and then I was only focusing on the states and city in United States. So we can do that. Now I can basically work on refresh. So whatever preview was stored in the memory, we are just refreshing it. Now here we have this row ID, and if you see, the row ID is an integer. Obviously we will not be performing any kind of computation here. So here you don't have any row ID, but here we have row ID. So let's make it from integer, let's make it string, and I'll say replace current. So that looks fine. It's a row ID which we will use to search, but we are not going to perform any computations unless you want to find on an average on row ID or anything else. Now you have order IDs. So what we can do is we can filter some values. We can rename the field as we desired, right? So for example, let's go in here, and what we can do is let's go into customer ID ship. Okay, and here you have, say, state, you have region. Okay, now at any point of time, if I would want to filter out the values, the easier option is that you can select on this one, and here you can do some text filtering. Okay, or you can basically select the values from here. So for example, if I say let's get rid of select all, what we will be interested in, say United States and UK, that's the data we want, and then I can basically say okay. So it is basically going to filter out the data which is for United States and UK as of now. Now what we can also do is, how about doing some more filtering before we basically work on this. So let's go in here, and we are looking at United States and UK related data, and let's look at, it is sometimes good that you can basically work on the data here. So for example, I go into orders. Now what I would want to do is I would want to look at the fields. Okay, and we have not yet loaded the data. So if you look in the background, I just have my scientists, because we have not applied these changes, we have not loaded, we are still in the transformation stage. Right now what we can do is let's go for, so we can do segment, and all these kind of fields can be used for grouping the data. So we will see that whenever you have a data set, you would already know there are certain fields which have repeated values which can be used to group the data. And we can do that. We can change any kind of values which are not going to be computed on. So for example, I have postal code. I can use this, but again, we are not going to find a postal code which is greater than something, right? So integer is not the valid type. Let's change it to text. Okay, and if for example I would want to look at this, so I have done some changes here. Okay, and this shows me null. So for example, let me just revert this back, and let's make it a whole number. Okay, so there are certain columns or rows which do not have some values, and we can basically get rid of those values. So as of now, we can do a filtering here. So let's keep the postal code as integer, or let's change it to text, do a replace content. And now what we will do is we'll scroll all the way right. Might be I'm interested in technology category, so that's what I'm interested in. So what I can do is here I can do some filtering. So I can basically choose technology. Now the easier way would be, since these are categories and there are only 3 categories, we really don't want to go and apply text filters here. But if you had something like an office supply and office inventory, then you could have done some text filters. So let's not do some text filtering here. What we can do is, I would be interested in technology, so that's the field I'm interested in. So now you are only having data which is related to technology. Okay, and you have some product names. So this is where we want to do some kind of filtering. So we can rename the field, we can select some field. So let's, for example, let's go for any of the field which I think might have more entries here. So for example, let's go for Canon wireless or Canon image, right? So let's go for product names, and I will say let's go here. Now I could have done a transformation, but that's not what we want. We want to do some filtering. So let's go to text filter, and here I can say begins with, I can say ends with, I can say contains. So let's go for contains, and it says enter a value here. So you would want to keep the rows where the product name contains something, and it gives you some suggestion, right? So where you are seeing in some values here. So for example, if I would have selected this, then it applies the complete thing, but that's not what I want. So I will get rid of all this, and I will say it contains Canon. Now I can go for advanced filtering also, okay, wherein you can select advanced, and then you can give different columns and what do they contain, what kind of values you're looking for. So you can do that, but we will not go for advanced in one step. Let's go for basic, and let's say okay. And now I should get all the products which are Canon, and you have different products. So this is one kind of filtering I've done. It tells me what is the category of this. It is machines, it is copiers, it is obviously belonging to the technology category. We are looking at the market which is for this particular data. When you look at the country, we are still focusing on United States and United Kingdom, that kind of data, right? So we have filtered the data, we have done some selection based on the data here, and what I can do is I can then basically rename a particular field. So I can do that. I can say I'm interested in sales, which is the data here. We can basically look into the quantity. So sales is something which we are interested in, but might be we are interested in sales which are more than a particular value. I'm not interested in lower amount of sales. I would want to look into United States and UK data, but I'm interested in sales, or I'm looking at if the discount percentage was something, or if the profit was more, right? So we can apply different kind of values here, but what we can do is with these changes, because you don't want to transform and make changes all here, you want to make the changes once the data set is uploaded. So we have selected some data, we have done some transformations. We can basically break a particular column into multiple columns if that's what we want. If we see that, we will do an aggregation based on year, or we will do a aggregation based on the country or year and order ID, right? So we can break this data into multiple columns, so we can do that. But for now, let's do a close and apply, and let's apply this. So that's going to apply all these changes. It's going to load my data. But remember, now we are having selective or selected data which gets loaded. So that should be available here. So it takes time sometimes, so you have to wait, and then you can go ahead and check here. So for example, now I'm looking in tables. Let's basically minimize this. Let's go for orders, and this is the data I have, which obviously row ID, if you see. So you have all the row IDs, and again you can do filtering here, but this is where you have already loaded the data is available, and then you can start working on the columns here. So we have this. If you closely see, we see this summation mark, and this basically means that these are my aggregated columns, or these values are measures which can be used for calculations. So we can see that we can create our own aggregations. So we can do that. We can rename the field as we have seen. We can filter out the data, so we have all the fields showing up from orders. And let's also look at the returns, which basically has the columns, the order ID, and your region. So it basically shows the region here, where was the product returned from, and we have this information. So what we are doing is, when we were doing a text filter in the previous example, remember, it was case sensitive. Okay, and you have to take care of, when you're doing a text filter, you have to give a field which exactly matches as it exists in the content. Now, okay, this is the data we have, and let's look at the order column. Right now, what we can do is, we can do some quick transformations here, and we can basically look for more data here. So let's say we have some filtering to be done. Now I can do a filtering based on my products. So we had all these products, but now let's do a filtering on product. And then products, you have copiers, you have machines, so you have mainly two categories, right? And when you look at machines, it basically talks about your PC, uh, something. So let's look for machines, and here we have basically the copier fields, which are more. So I can basically go for filtering here, and that's the data we have. So we don't want to really unselect any of these here, but what I'm doing is, I'm saying text filter, and let's go into this one now, and let's say contains. Okay, so I'm saying contains, and then I can basically say, let's say copier. Now that's what I'm interested in. And show rows where product name contains copier. Okay, now you can give a and condition here. So if you would want a specific copier, if you are interested in, okay, let's also say contains, and let's go for laser also, laser, and let's say okay. So you see the data gets filtered out here, and we have the sales which we are seeing here. So let's go to sales, and we will be interested in anything above 500. So let's go to sales, let's go for number filters, let's say greater than, and I will say, for example, 500, oh sorry, 500. Okay, and let's say okay. So that basically filters out the data. And then I am also interested in quantity, where I would want the quantity to be more than 1 or more than 2. So for example, so let's go in here, and you can basically choose what is the filter you want. So you can apply any number of filters. Now you have the filtering here, you can always click on the filter, and if you want, you can just do a clear filter, and the filtering will be gone. So you have all the data, right? And this is the particular data we have. And here I have, say for example, product name. Now I can keep the filter because I'm interested only in these values, or I can filter out. So this tells me that when we did a and, it is basically going for laser and copier, right? So let's say for example, clear all filters, the thing is gone. What we can do is, let's go here, go for text filters, say contains, and here I will say it can be a copier. Okay, or, so last time we did a and I'll do it contains laser. So let's choose this. That gives me more entries. So either the product name has copier, or it has laser, it has the quantity, it has the product name, and we have all this detail here. Now what we can also do is, we can do some transformation on the product ID. So for example, you have product ID or order ID. So order ID shows up as looks like the country name, the year, and then the order ID. So we can basically split it up. So I can select this, and here I have option of, let's go to home. So when you have selected this column, so you have an option of transform data here. So use the Power Query editor to connect, prepare, and transform the data. So if you really want to transform the data here, if I basically select this, if I just do a right click here, now here it just tells me, do you want a new column? Do you want to create a copy of this column? Okay, you want to create copy table. So this is your transformed data what you have. And for example, let's create a copy table, and let's come in here. So you should be able to see your copy table now. So let's go in and select this one. And what you need to do here is creating a copy of this or copy table would not be the right option. What we can do is we can work on transforming this rather than doing it from here. So you have this option of adding a new column, going for a new measure, renaming it, right? So that's okay. But what we can do is select this particular column. Let's do a home. And first thing is, let's go to transform. So I want to transform the data. Now let's select this one, and it brings up your Power Editor again. Here we were interested in orders. So we are looking at our data here. Now if you see, my country is United States and UK, so you can confirm that. If you look at category, it is technology. Product name has copier and laser as we selected. So those things are retained, so you have not lost any changes as of now. So this order ID column what we have now, as I said, you can be doing a filtering. Okay, you can select this particular column, and then you have other things which can be used to transform here, like you want to change the data type, you want to use first row as header, you want to replace some values. Okay, you want to run some merge queries, you want to do some analytics. So all these options are here. Now what we can do is, while this column is selected, I can do a right click. Now there is an option called transform, which is basically going to help me in changing the data here. Okay, now I can basically duplicate the column. So I really don't want to work on this column itself, but it would be good to have a duplicate column on which we can work on. So I can do a split column here if I would want to, but let's create a duplicate column. So let's say duplicate column. Now that gives me a duplicate column, so we can rename it later. So now I will not work on my original column, but I'll work on a duplicate column. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically transform or split this. So again, do a right click. Now you have a split by. So we can say split by delimiter, or by number, or by characters, or by position. So by lowercase and uppercase. So you can do all of this. So let's go for by delimiter. Now, if you see, it basically identifies the delimiter, which is hyphen or dash. Now you can go for split at leftmost identifier, leftmost delimiter, rightmost, each occurrence of delimiter, and that's what we want to do. You can look into advanced options where it says split into columns. So do you want to split that into columns? Do you want to split that into rows? Because that's more or less like doing a group by. And you can say number of columns to split into. So we have here 1, 2, 3, 4 values. So that looks good to me. And let's do, say for example, if I choose 3. So I can choose 3 and then split using special characters. So you could do that. So let's, for example, let's say okay, and let's look at the data, how it looks like. We can anytime delete the data, we can keep it the way we want, right? So what we did was we created a copy of the column, then we did a split, and what we have seen is we just have 3 columns. Now if you see, the fourth bit is gone, fourth bit doesn't show up, right? Because I just did a 3 as the resulting column. So I have the order ID. Okay, and we can check if there is already an order ID column. So we have order ID, but that has the complete order ID, year, and the relatively product ID. So you can see the customer ID. You can look at this one. So it basically has your order ID, and then let's look at the fields here. So we have the product ID, which says TECMA. I'm looking at the first one, 3700, and that has in no relation to the order ID, right? So we can make sure that there is nothing which is conflicting with our entries. Now once that is done, so we have order ID, which can be used to categorize the data. You have order ID, which is basically the year. Okay, and you have order ID, which is basically having some more value. Now I can keep this data as I want, so I can basically click on this. I can go for renaming, and I can say, let's call it order ID, and let's say IDs. So let us, in case there is a particular column and you would want to look at, so just give the name correctly. Now order IDs is fine. So here we will also rename this one. So let's call it order year, and that's going to be order year. So we can again change this to string. Okay, and here you have the order ID. So let's rename this one, and I have my, let's call order number, right? So we are seeing all the steps which we have added here. We just split the data based on the delimiter, and we have now 3 new columns which have got added to our existing data, which was already filtered. And we have done some splitting up of data by creating a duplicate and then renaming it, right? So if you go and look at your transformations, now if I would have done a split here straight away, then my original column would be gone. But probably we want the original column, because sometimes you may want to search order ID with a consolidated information. Sometimes you may want to segregate it based on year, right? Now we have the year field or order date field here. You have the ship date, right? But then might be you want to just aggregate based on year. You don't want to really spend time in aggregating or extracting the month and day and so on. So these 3 columns can be useful. Now what I can also do is I can merge the columns if I want. So we have split the columns, but what I can do is I can say select, select, select. So using your control, and now do a right click. So you should have an option called merge columns, right? Now this is something which is we would want to merge. So let's say merge columns, and let's say, do you want to keep a separator? So yes, I want to keep a separator, but might be this time I will give my separator is a colon, and then what is the merge column name you want to create? So let's call it something like um, order, okay, year, and then let's call it num, right? So sometimes renaming the fields to a name which makes more sense or based on your naming convention is good. So let's do a merge. And now what I have done is I have done merging of those columns. So I split the data, I merged the columns, and now if you see the columns which I had created, those columns are gone because you did a merge. You did a merge, and now you have the fields which are either earlier you had something which is separated by a hyphen, and here you have something which is separated by colon, right? Now anytime if you want, you can unmerge this by removing this step, right? And you can get rid of this merge column. So if for example I would do that, so I have my data back, right? I have my data back. So what we could have done is we can select this, okay, and then what we can do is like what we did earlier. So you can basically go for removing the columns, okay. You can do a merge column, okay. You can select one by one and create duplicate of those, and then you can merge them, right? So all the possible options are there. So you can, the best option would be to create a duplicate of these columns and then basically merge them as per your convenience. So might be you can say order IDs and order number is the pairing what you want. Year is something which you don't want, right? Because we already have the date field. So I can basically say remove, and this one is gone. Now I will select this and this, and let's go for merge columns, and I want to give a separator which is might be without the year, and you have space, or you can go for custom like earlier we had, give a symbol, and then what do you want to call it? So let's say order specs, okay, right? So this makes more meaning because we already have the date field. So why do I want the year into my order ID? So I can always be doing a segregation now based on order specs, right? Now this is some simple transformations what we are doing here. We are seeing the data which we have, okay. Now what I can do is I can basically first apply these changes so that all my changes what I have done are applied, right? Now once these changes are done, we can basically go ahead and save this file. So I can just say save, I can go for save as. I have different other options. So if you would want to keep performing your transformation, then you can just do this. You can add a column, you can view the data. So for now our transformations are good enough, and what we can do is we can basically go back to home, we can do a close and apply, and we will be back to our data set which has been modified. So we can see if the data what we have has been transformed. So we have order specs here, that's good. We did not do any filtering, or we have the filter left here, which basically tells me that there are these different fields. We have not removed them, but what we are doing is we are just applying a filter to choose copiers and laser printers. So that's what we have here, and this is good enough. Now what I can do is once this is done, I can basically save it. So I would want to call it some kind of report if you would want to create, okay. So let's call it as let's say second report, and here I will say country and technology specific info. Let's save it, and now basically I have saved my data. So what you can do is you can go for creating other report, or basically having this information published if that's what you want to do, if you want to go for visualization, because right now what we are seeing is we have a lot of data here, We have a lot of data here. It shows me there are these tables or data sets which we have worked on that shows me here in the models, but there is no relationship in them. If you go into visualization, then you don't have any option, or you have not created any visualizations based on this data. But if you go here, now based on the data what we transformed, if you see, we have order specs, right? Now that's what we chose. We basically have other fields, so you have ship date, you have aggregated columns which can be used for visualizing, and we can work on this. So I can come back here, and what I would be interested in is this data set is fine, but I want to do some grouping. I want to basically have some selective data in this, and for that what I can do is let's go for ship mode. Now this is something what we have. So we are in this data field. Now we have this transform. So let's go back to transform again, and let's choose our orders. So that's the data we have. And now if you see here, this is, huge amount of data. What we want is we want to group them based on the shipping mode. So here you have an option called group by. So I can select this. I can go in here. I can basically work on, okay, get rid of duplicate values, but that's not what we want to do. You want to do a group by. So as I said, you can do a group by from here, or you can choose from the transform option above and you can do a group by. So let's do a group by. Now, how do you want to group the data? So I'm saying I want to group the data here based on shipping mode, or which is the other column you want to use to do a group by. So let's go for shipping mode. And what is the new column name, right? So we want to basically find out that you want to go for ship mode, but that's not enough. I mean, I can do a ship mode and I can do a grouping by, but you want to just count the rows? No, that's not what we want to do. So let's go to advanced. So ship mode is fine. So that's your grouping, right? But then what we also want to do is we want to do a grouping based on, say, sales. So here, for example, let's go for sales. Okay. And what should we call this? So might be we can say shipment wise sales, whatever you would want to call. So you can basically get the operation. Do you want to really count the rows? No, we want to basically do a summing, or we want to might be find out an average price, right? So let's do a sum. Okay, and here I would want to do a summing based on, say, for example, sales. So this is what I'm going to use for getting a count of the sales. Now grouping by, might be we will change this. uh, instead of sales, we are using a ship mode. What we can also do is let's go for a segment, and that would be valid grouping. So it will take a combination of ship mode, segmenting, group the data based on that, and then get me the sales, which is basically, let's call it shipment wise sales. So it gets a sum. So let's do a okay, and that's my more relevant data which I'm looking at. So I'm looking at the ship mode, I'm looking at what is the segment, and then I'm looking at what is the total sales there. I'm looking at, again, the ship mode, standard, and home office. So always remember, when you are choosing multiple fields or multiple columns for grouping by, you are basically having a combination of two fields. So that has to be unique, and your grouping is done based on that. So now you're looking at the sales wise, and this is something as an important information what we have. So we have done some transformation, and what you can do is you can use other ways, like you can use pivot to get individual values from it. You can run on merge queries, which is basically running some merge queries and merge the query with another query in this workbook if you have. So you can go for this. Now I can basically go for apply and close. So just to add to the group by step, what we did was, if you see here, I have removed the group by filter, which we just did couple of minutes back. And what I have done is, instead of transforming your complete data set, you can basically create a copy of it. So for example, I can just do a copy, and then I can come here and do a paste, and I have done that, and I'm calling it order summarized, but this is my complete data. Now what we will do here is we will basically go ahead and do a grouping by, again, like what we did earlier, based on your shipment, based on your segment, and based on the sales. So that's what we are looking for. So let's go for the ship mode, and we go for group by, and here you would want to go for advanced, to ship mode, and this one I will go for segment. So that's fine. Now we want the new column name, so let's say shipment wise sales. So I want to do a summing, not the counting of rows, and I want to do a summation based on sales, like what we did earlier. And then you say okay, and that basically gives you the data here. Now what we have is, we have the resultant data based on the data which is coming in from here. We did the same thing just 1 minute back, but we worked on the original data set. So what I did was, I created a copy, and now I'm working on this one. So I'll say close and apply, and now we are back to our desktop. So it is applying these changes where we have done some transformations, we have done some grouping by, and what we can do is, once we have the data here, we can anytime look at our data sets or tables. So this is my original one. If you see, now I have order summarized. I can just pull out this information. I basically have my returns, which we have not really touched, and we have the scientists. So we have all the 4 data sets here. Now what we can also do is, let's look into order summarized, and we just have this data here. So this is fine, and you can continue working on this. You can basically merge columns from 2 different data sets, and then you can get the merged column and you can rename it. So you can obviously do that. You can basically do a uncheck whenever you're working on these data sets. So what you can do is, if you would want to work on transforming, for example, let's go back here and say I want to do some transformation on it. So how did we do it? We just did a transform, and you can go back to transform. So you have this data here, and the data what you have, you might be interested in transforming this into something else, and then you don't want to maybe load this data. So you have this option where you are selecting orders, and then you have something called as enable load, which can be unchecked. So when you do a uncheck, what will happen is, whatever changes you perform, only those changes related data set will be loaded, and they will still be available, but this will not affect your, it will not affect your original one. So for example, let's say copy, and let's go in here. I will do a paste. Let's say orders. Oh, I did a paste. I need to rename this. So let's do renaming. Let's say orders, and here I will say summarized, and I will say US. So I'm renaming it. Now let that get loaded. We can perform some transformations on it. So I have here, where's my country? So let's look for country. Yeah. and let's look for country. So here I will go for only United States. Okay, that's what I'm interested in. And then I can choose, well, I'm interested in just central US. So I can basically go for just the central US and I can get rid of all of these. So now I should have only central US data, and this is fine. And this is the data might be we are focusing on right now for doing some visualization, might be looking at sales, might be looking at the product names. So you have the product name. Now remember, you don't see any filters here, right? Because the filters are coming from the resultant set and your transformation. So if you have any filters, you would be seeing in the top row. Now this is the data we have. Let's not restrict it to region would then reduce my data, but that's good enough for us. I can just say no, I'm clearing off this filter. I'm still looking at United States, but I want to look at all the regions. Yeah, we would be interested in category, and that's anyways chosen as technology, which we had chosen when we were loading the data. We have copiers and machines, right? And we can basically keep this. Now this is fine. I can apply the changes. I can apply the changes based on this one. And what I can do is I can just say for now apply. So that's going to apply all the changes which you have done in orders or summary or the new one, right? And what I can do is now I can choose order and I can say don't enable this in load. So it says disabling load will remove the table from the report and any visuals that use its columns will be broken. We are not creating any visuals as of now. The table will be removed. So that's fine. And now I will say close and apply. So what happens is you are loading the data based on the changes. Okay, now you have your order summarized, you have returns, you have scientist, but you basically do not have orders anymore. So that was not loaded. So I only have this one, I only have this one, and you have returns, you have scientist, you don't have the orders column, right? Now that particular data set was not loaded at all because we did not choose that to be loaded, right? Now while I'm in this orders, which is, let's see here, and actually you can drag in, yeah. So you have order summary, and this has basically kind of data which I'm looking for. So I really don't need the orders table. So you can do it in steps and you can aggregate this. You can have aggregated data. You can have all the data which is filtered, transformed, grouped by, and then basically just load it. And the original data set which you used, that's no more being loaded here. Now at any point of time, if I really want, I can go back to transform data, and remember, it is still here. It is still here. It's not gone, right? So you can basically select this and you can say enable load and you will have the data back, which you can continue working on, right? So these are some quick transformations which really help us in working on the data. Now, obviously, if you have data, you want to perform some left joins, right joins, you have inner joins, outer joins, so you can always do that. You can take two different data sets. Might be I'm interested in taking the orders summarized, which talks about standard class, consumer, shipment wise sales. And here, if I look at order summary, I have other details, but the thing is we need to make sure that these have the values. These have the values. Say for example, the segment column here and the segment column here can really be used to join these two tables. So if I create a relationship or if I create a join, I can basically merge the data. So this is how you work on data. We will also see some more examples on might be modeling the data, using some expressions to work on the data. So we already looked at creating a report, selecting particular fields, and then publishing the report onto your Power BI service. Now this is the report which we had created, which says state, order ID, sales, and then I also added this returned field, and that was basically by creating a relationship between order and returns, which we can also have a look in model. So this is the relationship which is created. If you just place your cursor here, it tells me that we have a relationship between order ID of returns and order ID of orders, and that basically allows me to join the data, bring it in my one report. Now this is basically your data sources you can look at, and if you click on your visualization, so that shows you your report. Now what we can also do is we can make it interesting. Now we would not want to scroll through the fields to see wherever or what was the order or what was the order ID which was returned. Now I can do a sorting, I can filter out. What I can also do is I can use this option which shows slicer here, and that basically allows me to work with this data. So we have this report here, and basically, as I said, you can click in here, it shows the data. Now what I can do is I would want to filter out information or slice the information using your returned, either being yes or having a field which has no value. How do we do that? So basically I can drag and drop the returned here as a field which comes from returns. Now that basically shows me only the value as yes, but I do know that there are some fields which are blank. Now how do I add filter to this? So I can click on this one, and then I can click on slicer. Now once that does, so it basically pulls out all the different values. So you have either yes or you have the blank field for returned. So what we can do is we can select yes. You will see only the orders and their IDs and sales where the products were returned. So that gives me 108,118, and I can select blank. So that will basically get me all the orders or products which were not returned. Now this is a simple way wherein I can add a filter to or a slicer to my report to basically give viewers a choice of selecting different fields, and you can add any number of slicers. You can basically say I would want particular kind of information. So for example, if I go into orders, and we know we have the state. Now I do have the state information here, and basically I can, if I would be interested, I could filter this out in my report itself. I can sort it, I can look it in a different order. What I can also do is, how about bringing in state here and basically dragging it here? So that gives me the state option. It is giving me a visual, which is basically giving me a geographic location of all these points. So yes, that can be good. What I can also do is I can keep this, which basically shows me the state map. Might be it can be useful. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can look at specific information here, you can drag and drop here. So that's fine. What I can also do is I can again take the state and bring it here, and that basically can be, instead of my map, I can go for slicer. So that gives me all the values here, and which basically allows users to choose the fields or the states which you would be interested in looking at. So for example, if somebody is interested in looking at the data for Georgia, just select this one, and you see the map automatically shows you where in the map that's the place, and it shows me all the sales for Georgia state. Now I can also basically select yes, and that shows me which were the orders which were basically returned. So that gives me a quick overview of state wise what is the geographical location, if the orders were returned, or might be I can just click on blank and it shows me the non-returned orders I can again go here and uncheck the Georgia option, and that shows me all the states. Now, once you have done this, this looks like a comprehensive report which can be useful for the viewers, for your management team, and so on. So we can just do a save, and that basically is saving my report. So I have this report. Now, what if I publish this report? So I can just do a publish, and when I publish, it says, okay, workspace. So let's say select, and then it says replacing this data set may impact two reports. You already have a data set named by this one. View the impact. I would say replace, or I will say view impact. So that basically takes me to the Power BI service, because sometimes we may have some reports which we have already uploaded, and updating an existing report might basically affect my existing report. So it basically shows me the impact analysis. It shows me one workspace. There are two reports. They have not been added to dashboard, but these are the ones which will get modified. So let's, for example, as of now, go ahead here and let's look into my Power BI. So go back to your desktop, and I'll say no, I don't want to replace. So click on cancel. So I do not want to publish it. What might be what I can do is I can try saving it as a different report. So let's say save as, and now I will basically say additional filters. Okay, let's save it. So now you see the name on the top changes to additional filters, and now it's saved to publish this. And now I can go ahead and publish it. Select your workspace, and basically it says this is the report being published with our additional filters, with a map which gives a geographical area showing us the information. And then basically what I can do is, once it is done, I can look into my Power BI service like we did earlier. You can do a filtering. We can basically query this data. We can share it with other users who might be interested in looking at this particular data. Now this says it is done. So it says get quick insights, and might be it's a good an option to look into what kind of insights it gives you. So click on that. See the beauty of Power BI, where it tries to search for any kind of insights which it can gather from the kind of report which you have built. Now, once the insights are ready, it will let you know. What we can also do is we can come in here, click on view data set. So you see now it shows your additional filters, and here you have option where it should be showing your report. So let's say view, and view is fine. So, and if it doesn't show up, sometimes it might be taking time for refreshing. So you can always go here, and then you can click on your report, and that should get populated. So this is the report. These are the filters which I have. Gives me an option of choosing all the states, and basically allows me to edit the report and look at all the information here. Meanwhile, we can see here it is still trying to gather some insights from the data. And now you see there are some insights here. So it says sales, which is coming up, and a subset of your data was analyzed and the following insights were found. So you're looking at sales by ship mode. So it says standard class, second class, first class, and same day. So there were different shipping modes in our data, and that's what it shows me: the sales, which one had the majority. It shows me the profit, so which city or state had more profit. So New York City has noticeable more profits here. Average by shipping cost, by subcategories. So there are these different subcategories which we can look at, such as copiers and machines have noticeably more shipping cost. Profit by product name, and you can basically look at the row ID and quantity. So this is where you're looking at a regression analysis. you're looking at row ID and quantity. So there is a correlation between row ID and quantity. So these are two different variables or fields which are related. You're looking row ID by category, row ID. So it says California has noticeably more row IDs, sales, your profit, count of region and count of returns. So there is a correlation again between two different variables. Average of shipping cost. Now we would have taken a lot of time building all these visualizations, but Power BI has already helped you in gathering all these insights, and then you can basically select which one of these is what you're interested in. You can focus and look for more information based on all the fields. It has given you good amount of insights which will help anyone who is looking at this particular report. So that's your quick insights here, and we have this information. Now once you have this information, this is basically where you have your focus mode. So it says subset of your data was analyzed, following insights were found. You can basically say download, and here you have other options which allow you to work with your Power BI. So let's look at this one. So this is where we have our report, and we can continue exploring it more. One more interesting feature which Power BI has, other than having your insights ready to use, which is basically in your workspace, and you can basically use these insights. What we are looking at, various options here, and basically you have this option where it says spin the visual. If you are interested in a particular insight, you can always pin it, which you can always go back and look into. What you can also do is you can also click on edit report here. Now that's a report which has already been published to your Power BI service, not yet shared, but that can be shared or that can be subscribed. Now once you click on edit report, it has option of reading view, mobile layout. You have basically an option which says basically options for navigating through the data set. You can go for how visuals on the canvas interact with each other. You have all these options, and one of the good options is ask a question. So you can always click on ask a question, and that basically says some suggestions. Now you can open this and it says, okay, ask a question about your data. Try one of these to get started. What is the average sale? Sort orders by order date. Sort orders by product ID. How many ship modes are there? Compare quantity and discount. So do not worry that your report has only 4 fields. So it has state, order ID, sales, and returned, with some filters. But what about you looking at how many ship modes are there? So it is already looking at your data. So if you click on this one here, and you can see what are the different fields what we have, and you have ship date and ship mode. So this is one of the fields which it is showing you to ask a question. Now what you can do is you can say how many ship modes are there. Let's click on that. Let's ask this question. It says 4 ship modes. And do you want to add this to report? Yes, you can. You can let it be as it is. So you can basically keep this question here. And here you have an option. The visual is showing number of ship modes. When you place your cursor here, if you see here, turn this Q&A result into a standard visual. And let's do that. And basically it is saying number of ship modes. Right? So now that's the power of your Power BI, which has basically allowed you to ask a question and quickly add a visual to your report. Now what we can do is we can basically save this, or you can say save as and give a different name. So might be I'll just say save, because I would want to have this information and the report is saved. So in this way, you can basically not only create smart visuals, you can not only relate different data sources using data models or relationships, you can add maps, you can add filters, you can add quick questions. You can basically just go here and say, for example, you would want to ask a different question. Now we see the fields here. How about looking at the shipping cost, right? So here I can say what is the highest shipping cost, and that shows me some suggestions. Let's select that, and that shows me the value, which is great. And I can keep it as it is. I can basically convert this to a visual. I may want to keep the question because might be this question was asked and you would want to see the result here. Might be you can move this somewhere here, and that gives me some kind of question which was asked, and we can do a save. And that's my report, which has been saved in my BI service. The data set is still there. You can basically go ahead and share this.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.